these days during the conference with your friends and family and advocating the message of the conference. So please feel free by the end of the conference, take them apart and take them with you and send them to your family and friends. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the next speaker, which is Monica Barzanti. Monica is the head of international relations, the community of San Patrignano in Italy. And she will be sharing on understanding the needs of children whose primary caregivers use drugs. And before I give the floor to Monica, I just want to say that we have our time for our speakers, which is 30 minutes, 20 minutes presentation, 10 minutes Q&A. For all the speakers that are going over time, we will be taking time from the other speakers. So please keep your time as your time frame given. Thank you so much.
Hi, good morning. I hope you enjoyed the Indian food, but you are still awake. So I would like to first congratulate Fourth Way Foundation for what they have created, not only this amazing and excellent event, but what they have done prior to that. And so I would like all of you to stand up and make a big applause to Diana and Joseph and all their team that worked so hard in doing such great achievement. Congratulations, Diana, congratulations, all of you. Also, I want to thank WFAD, of course, and UNODC, September 2022, where we see the maltreated children. 3 out of 4 children, or 300 million children, aged 2 to 4, so small children, suffer some abuse at the hands of their parents or caregivers. It's a terrific number, isn't it? 1 in 5 women and 1 in 30 men report sexual abuse as a child. 120 million girls and young women under 20 years of age have suffered some forced sexual contact. So these numbers are already terrible, but they are underestimated because WHO warned us that this number are not the real number because maltreated children are hidden. It is important to prevent, and we can prevent it, but how we can prevent it if we don't detect it, if they remain hidden. And also, the approach should be focused on family and children. But let's have a look at which are the risk factors. That might be community and societal factors, such as social and gender inequality, lack of housing, rigid social norm, and also the easy availability of drugs and alcohol. But might be also parent and caregiver characteristic that can be, again, financial difficulties, unemployment, also having been maltreated themselves as a child. Please remember this part because it means that the chain of difficulties is transgenerational. And also, again, the use of alcohol and drugs is one of the characteristics that may create difficulties in their child. So what this amount of risk factors says is that it is not a matter of one thing happening, but an overlapping of different difficulties in which drug use is a part of them, and we have to address this problem having in mind this keyword, intersectionality between the main different aspects that might affect and impact on children's lives and family lives. If we want to break this chain of transmission of difficulties, social exclusion that affect school performances, drop out of school, long-term unemployment, poverty, and again, social exclusion, we have to address all these issues in a holistic way, multifactorial approach, but we have to specifically address also substance use disorder because it has specific characteristics that need to be known and explored to give the appropriate answer. If WHO say that children who are maltreated are hidden, we would say that children whose parents use drugs are invisible. They are invisible to drug policy. They are unnamed, unreferred in any strategies. They really are not recognized as a suffering, vulnerable population. Of course, the literature told us that they suffer in this condition. The substance use in their parents has a huge impact on their life. But still, there is not enough studies on how to work on this impact. Services are not equipped, not trained. They do not know how to deal with this situation. Often there are two different services, at least in Western country. One addresses the child protection, of course, having at the center the protection of the child, and service for drug users to address dependency, but they do not communicate, do not work together, and this has an impact in children and families. Of course, parents who use drugs are often denial in front of their addiction. They do not want to express their problem, or they try not to leave it as a problem and are not fully aware of what their behavior, how the impact that their behavior has on their children's lives. In addition, they do not want to disclose with the service, when they get in touch with the service, about this situation. They are afraid that their children will be removed from their custody. And another thing is that also children often do not disclose about their difficulties at home. They love their parents anyway, and they do not want to be removed for their parent custody. So this parental bonding exists. Parents love children, children love their parents, and we have to take into account these things if we have to take appropriate decision to help them. This link is about EMCDDA that collected some data regarding children living with parents using drugs, but they are fragmented, not uniform, collected, and so it is not something really helpful. So it is important, on the contrary, to have clear data. Sorry. Okay, why this situation is so invisible, so hidden? Because substance use disorder rank first among the most stigmatized conditions. There are three main perspectives. One is blame. People blame people who use drugs because they think that it's their own fault. If possible, women have a double stigma because they are women also, and I can say that mother has a triple stigma because they do not perform the assigned role as mother, as caregivers. This is not the same for father, I would say. The other reason why this condition is so invisible to policy is that most people consider that there is no way out from addiction. People can't recover, and it is very difficult. They always relapse, as Moses said very well this morning. And so how they can be parents. In addition, they are perceived as dangerous for society, as well as for their children. So how can they perform the role of caregiver or parents? So this brings to social exclusion, to even additional charge on the difficulty already present because of substance use disorder. And people also internalize this stigma, so they socially exclude from society together with their children, creating a sort of isolation around them where it is not possible to access, or where they increase the sufferings of the children and of the family as a whole. We have heard from a lot of speakers this morning how substance use affects families, but we should have in mind that this is not definitely cancelled. The parenting capacity of people who use drugs is not cancelled completely. They can regain the skill if they are appropriately supported and helped. Of course, facing substance use disorder and the challenge of being a parent, you know, who of you is a parent knows that being a parent is very challenging. If you had both burden on you, and sometimes it's a woman that bear the double burden, make life very difficult. In this situation, they often come in contact with services because they are referred to by someone that sees the difficulties of the children, and so they come in contact with services. But what they found there, if general stigma is difficult to overcome, stigma in services is a deterrent, has an impact, incredible impact on people who use drugs because they do not access to services. They need it, but they found a wall in front of them. They found a judgmental attitude. They found stigmatization. They do not find what they need more, which is hope. They need to find someone that can tell them, come with me, I will accompany and guide you towards improving the quality of your life, towards improving the quality of the life of your children, and I'm here for you. I believe that you can make it. Of course, they don't believe they can make it, but you have to believe in them until they are ready to believe in themselves. So this is what service should do, and not always they do. The intervention should be focused on both children and family, and so they should felt welcomed by services and accompanied in this pathway, which is very, very difficult, also without being stigmatized and hopeless and helpless and all the stuff that we put on it. Normally, actually, the standard intervention is the out-of-placement of the child away from his family, which occurs normally when the situation is really, really bad, because they get in touch with service when the situation is not compromised, but close to being compromised. So foster care starts, but parents are not helped at the same time in a path towards recovery. They are simply asked to stay abstinent. They are checked with sample of urine to assess they are clean, but they are not guided in this pathway. So what happens is that children pass from one foster care to another one, until they are grown up in a very difficult situation. And what happened to children who are in this situation? Research say that while in theory this would be a way to protect children from an environment which might be not good for them in a family where there is an addiction present, but on the contrary, substance use disorder are among the most frequent noted mental health issue for foster care youth, with prevalence rate for alcohol use, drug abuse, and drug dependency at 2 to 5 times higher than their peers with no foster care involvement. So foster care is not a solution, unfortunately, but we have to do something for these children in this family. That's why the Pompidou Group, in order to protect the right of the children and to advocate for them, started this study with a group of 16 countries, not only European one, it was also Mexico included, and Cyprus, and other countries that from Europe contributed, also Italy, Iceland, Ireland, contributed with their grassroots experience, not only from the policy point of view, but also grassroots experience. And as always happened, people who work in the field are more advanced than policymakers. So they studied on children's rights, on existing drug policy and available service, and reducing the impact on children, providing integrated service. These are the two recent publications by Pompidou Group. One is implementing gender approach. The other is children whose parents use drugs. Those two publications are, of course, connected. Now I will talk to you briefly about the two contributions I brought to the second children whose parents use drugs from Italy. One is this PIPI project. PIPI comes from a Swedish girl, protagonist of novels, that has as main specific characteristic the resiliency. She is resilient in front of any incredible difficulties. So I love this name of this project and the fact that this project counts on the resilience of the families and children as well. It was implemented as a pilot project, but now it is part of the national strategy in Italy. It has two main innovative features: integrated work in multidisciplinary and multi-service team, and active participation of children and their family through the Word of the Child triangle, with which children and families can express their need, can have a say, and really say what they really need. There is a toolkit, an educator, home educator, group of parents and child, solidarity networks. We know from an African say that there needs a village to raise a child, and so it increased the collaboration of the neighbor to support the family, school, family, service partnership. So mainly it wants to increase the collaboration and a multifaceted approach to the problem. The other experience I want to share with you is my own organization, which is San Patrignano, which is a peer-led community started in 1978 that welcomed people of any kind, of any age, included women with their children. What we tried to do, at least, is to support this path to recovery of women with their children in order to enable them to go back to society with strength and capacity to face the difficulty they will be facing. We provide dedicated housing, trauma-informed approach, parenting program based on peer support, of course, and education and vocational training activities for help them in their reintegration into society. And also after-school facility in order to allow women to be in place when they need time for their own recovery process, for their own vocational training activities. We can jump this and say that, well, stigma as well as substance use disorder is transgenerational. So what we need to do is to address family which has problem of substance use disorder, because in this way we will be able to help kids in this family to grow up healthy. Otherwise, they will feel guilty of having abandoned their family. They won't be able to detach from this missing their own parents if they are given in foster care. Well, this conclusion might be part of the question and answer if there are questions for me. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry I wasn't unable to share all, but I tried hard to keep 20 minutes, but it was not possible. It's such a complex topic. It's okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I'd like to know the meaning of
San Patrignano.
Yes, so you
Yeah,
answer that.
it's difficult. Too many GN to say. Yeah, yeah, it's a sound that, no, don't worry. Okay.
Okay, the second issue is, I think from this forum, we are seeing there's a lot of focus on the family as a contributor to the issue of children being initiated or getting into the habit of drugs. And that is true because the family is the very beginning of any society or any community. I would want to think that at one point or another, every society in the world has been communal. You know, they lived as a community. Yeah. But we see because of the shift of lifestyle, we are seeing a lot of individualism, just mind my own business, I don't care about the other person. Would you think it has, in a big way, contributed to the current family situation, where someone is going through a lot of trouble, a lot of experiences, traumatic experiences, but because the society is no longer communal, no one cares about the other person. Do you think it is a big contributor to the current state of the family, and the children who are being raised now having the same mentality that, mind my own business, even if we are family related, but don't mind my business, that this will be like a chain effect even in the coming generations, that people will be suffering on their own and not able to express themselves to the close people, to the relatives that are supposed to be helping them, and therefore this can be really a problematic situation even in the future. So I wanted just to know the shift of the family from being communal into being more capitalistic and individual as a main contributor to what families are going through at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, families are the core of society, but the individual single family, if is not integrated into a societal environment in which, as someone said this morning, environment is therapeutic, so that can be a lot of resources around you, even if your family doesn't have all these resources around you, there can be a lot of resources. So it should be important to have a cultural shift in a different situation in which people can really help each other, support each other, being able to recognize that the person beside you is not an obstacle to his career or to his success, but something to support and to being supported from. So this is something that should be changed. And I think that people who recover from substance use disorder can bring a contribution in this. There are studies according to which people who recover, who are in recovery, volunteer in their communities, contribute to the work in their communities, studied by David Best regarding recovery capital, that they really are the better expression of collaboration and work for the community as a whole. So I think that generosity is a characteristic that, having been so close to death, people in recovery are open to life and know that life is something so precious that goes beyond anything, money, work, business, career, and everything. So life is a fundamental thing. So they see life in every human being around them and want to contribute, want to help. So 70% or more people in recovery volunteer in their community. Around 35, 40 of the common people, not people in recovery. So I think this could be could make the difference, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for your presentation and your very inspiring statement. I think I'm thinking about it, what you just said. And I think one thing that struck me as well, like when you shared about the importance to look at the family as a whole rather than taking kids away from their parents, even though their parents might be facing substance use disorder. And I also think the one thing that you said in the beginning that struck with me is like how to protect the children if they are hidden. So I think we definitely have to work on that. So thank you for your contribution. And I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, Carlton Hall. He is the president and CEO of Carlton Hall Consultancy. And he will be sharing a contribution on the Fierce Urgencies of Now, changing the conversation about the power of prevention, commercialization, and inequity in a time of a global crisis. Carlton, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Oh, come on, do better than that. I've waited too long for this. Good afternoon, everybody. Fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to start off with a bit of a confession. I have more content than I have time, but don't worry about that. I am as excited as you are to hear from Margrét, so I'm looking forward to hearing that presentation, so we will be on time. But please provide me with just a little bit of an indulgence. I'm going to share a few ideas that I think have some relevance to this conference and what it is that we all came here to speak about. But I want to start off with something very personal to me. You have to understand how important Dr. Martin Luther King is not only to my country and to the world, but to my family personally. And when I found out that he spent time here and actually came to Kerala and spent time in Trivandrum, the very first thing he did is he went to a school to speak to young people, to hear from those young people. And what it was discovered is that that conversation with those young people actually awakened something inside of him that allowed him to come back to the US with a greater clarity. This was back in 1959, 3 years before I was born. So 3 years before I was born, you played a role in the life that I live. And so for that, and on behalf of my family, I say, Nani, thank you very, very, very much. It is in that same spirit that I share with you these ideas. I think that above all of the information that we have, what it is really about is that we have to be disruptive. Now, I got this from a social media post, and don't worry about that. I just like the way they described it. And what it says is that disruptive means to prevent something from continuing or operating in a normal way. And in a very real sense, what I believe that we are all here to think, to contribute to act upon, is how might we become better disruptors with what has become far too normalized in our society. And part of the idea around this is the fact that Simon Sinek, who some may know, shared this idea of people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And the essence of that idea is that if we're going to achieve change at a massive level, this is what Dr. King knew, then we have to discover the why behind what we do. And identify what we believe, and what he says is that if I find those who believe what I believe, then I can create from that a movement. And in a very real sense, what I believe we are all here to do is start a movement. And I am here as a preventionist. I stand proudly when I say that. And for me, that means I believe three things. First and foremost, I believe that the most effective way of addressing any problem is to prevent it before it starts. Secondly, I believe in the full engagement and empowerment of the community in both understanding the problem, but also being a part of the solution of that problem. And lastly, I believe in being guided by science in order to produce population-level change. That's what we have to be about. But 5 years ago, my life changed dramatically. 5 years ago, it changed in a way that created an awakening in me and gave me greater clarity on what it is that we do. 5 years ago, my wife and I became grandparents for the first time, right? And those of you who are grandparents, you already know what I'm about to say, because when you become a grandparent, your entire worldview changes. My grandchildren, my son gave me our first grandchild, and then 10 days later, my daughter gave birth to twins. And that's right, we went from 0 to 3 in less than 2 weeks. So my life changed. As I look at that, they call me Babu. Babu is Swahili for grandfather. There's no sweeter word in the world than to hear your children say Babu, right? And so here's the thing. When I go to their homes and I try to identify, Babu is here, I find out that for the life of me, I can't figure out how to get down the stairs. I can't open up a cabinet. I can't figure out how to charge my phone. And for the life of me, I don't know why you want to restrict certain areas of the home. I'm just saying. Here's the thing. In the context of this environment, who's the priority? Is it Babu? Who's the priority in the context of this environment, please? The children. Is there any doubt who the priority is in this environment? There is zero doubt who the priority is in this environment. Back in my country, not too long ago, the Drug Enforcement Administration released a report sending out a warning that there were rainbow-colored fentanyl pills that were getting into our society in a way that was targeting children. Who is the priority in our environment? I'm on a mission, and I'm here for one reason. I'm here to enlist as many of you as I can in that mission, and that mission is to refine how we think about prevention. For me, prevention is about identifying the most vulnerable in our population and identifying where they are most vulnerable. In other words, the environmental context that placed them at greatest risk. Like the top of the stairs is an invisible vulnerability for those children. And most importantly, how do we make prevention obvious? Because here's the deal. Across the lifespan of a child's life, there are invisible vulnerabilities that need to be made blatantly obvious. And guess whose role that is? That's our job to do. And so if we're going to do that and to do that well, then we need to do things like partner. So I'm here and I'm proud to be associated with an organization like the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children. I happen to serve on their board. You heard from Scott Henderson earlier this morning. And it's because I found out that they believe what I believe. But not only them, but I'm also extraordinarily honored to be learning with and learning from extraordinary leaders like Esborn and all of those that are associated with Movindi. Why? Because they believe what I believe. And when I have an opportunity to partner with the World Federation Against Drugs and the leadership that they provide to our world in bringing communities together to think about things that aren't talked about often, it is because they believe what I believe. And not only them, but my good friend Mattson spoke yesterday, and he shared this idea about there's a need to build a bridge. You're responsible for this. And so I believe that that bridge is a bridge that has to be about how we think about public health and criminal justice, and that the cornerstone of that bridge has to be prevention, because those of us who are here in the room, all of us in our separate ways, has a role that we need to play in accordance to making sure that we are able to come together. So this is not just a conference, this is the beginning of a movement for change if we're going to do things to protect our children. To my good friends from Kenya, Nakata brought a whole group of folks here, and it is because they believe what we believe in doing this. And so we are here, as Dr. King mentioned, because this is a fiercely urgent now that we have to begin to contend with. In our nation, whether it's the opioid epidemic or the growing debate around legalization, or the fact that there is a growing voice that is coming up trying to express hallucinogens as medication, or new psychoactive substances that are coming into our communities, or the emerging dangers of meth and the synthetic dangers that are associated as young people are beginning to engage in vaping and other issues. And even if I'm coming to this country and I'm thinking about the issues and the challenges that you all are facing in this country, there are urgent dangers that need to be made blatantly obvious in ways that we have to be about. And so part of what it is that we do in prevention, and make sure that I know when I have to shut up, part of what it is that we do in prevention is that we bring science to this conversation, right? And so this is what Mattson was talking about on yesterday. We understand how we help folks understand how to define those issues. How do we make sure that we identify those risk factors and protective factors so that we can understand the context of the environments that we're trying to serve? How do we then bring about a comprehensive set of strategies that have an evidence base to it so that we might be able to bring about change? But there is a fourth step that is, I believe, the most important step. And that fourth step is where we need the greatest degree of attention right now. How do we ensure that the science that we care so desperately about is spread among the people that we're trying to serve? Does that make sense to anybody here in the room? And so if we're going to do this, I think that there are a couple of things that we need to pay attention to. I'm just going to introduce a couple of ideas and then I'll be out of your way. First is, how do we communicate clearly the importance of what it is that we believe? I'm going to introduce a couple of slides with some data on it. This is representing the United States, but I just wanted to introduce the idea. What you see here are, you see the percentage of high school seniors, right? So these are 12th grade students who reported past month substance misuse, right? From mid-70s all the way up through today. And I don't mind the different colors, they represent different substances. What I want you to pay attention to is the trend line. The trend is going in an extraordinarily positive direction. In other words, what we are seeing is that there is some extraordinary progress that we are making in protecting the young people in the country as it relates to this. When you look at it from the other side, these are all the high school seniors in the US that reported they didn't use any substance in the past 30 days, right? Now look at that trend line. It is going in a positive direction, an extraordinary positive direction. The point that I'm trying to make here with these two slides is that the thing that we now can say with clarity is that prevention works. Prevention is part of what contributed to this taking place and becoming the norm. And if you don't remember anything else that I say, what we want to make sure we're doing is making sure that those trend lines keep going in that direction. Does that make sense to anybody here in the room? And so one of the ways in which we've been able to secure that is because we have adopted the process and the policy of the Strategic Prevention Framework in the United States. We've actually put resources behind trying to ensure that every community has a framework by which they can think about being clear about what prevention is for their communities. And so we have a way of making sure that everybody is on the same page. But if we're going to do that well, what I offer to you is that we can help our communities by prioritizing, making sure that we're clear in what it is that we're saying, that making sure that we're focusing locally and making sure that we're able to concretize what it is that we're talking about, defining our strategic leverage by strategizing and ensuring that we are able to engage effectively and equitably across our communities. If we're going to make science matter, I believe that there are things that we can do in order to produce that change. And then lastly, a couple of things. There are some opportunities for us to begin to think about some of this. Some of the data that I'm going to be presenting, actually all the data that I'm going to be presenting, has been provided by some extraordinary heroes of mine. Dr. Bertha Madras, Dr. Robert DuPont, and Dr. Caroline DuPont did some remarkable work in trying to help us to understand this issue better when it comes to our young people. They went through the data that we have in our nation, and they asked two succinct questions. The first question they asked is the use of one substance by adolescents associated with the increased risk of using any other substance regardless of sequence? And then they asked the second part of that question, the inverse of that question, is non-use of one substance associated with the decreased risk of using other substances? Let me just share with you quickly a couple of things that were staggering to me. So I'm going to just explain this, and if you understand how to look at the one slide, you'll understand how to look at the others. This is past month alcohol misuse and associated with the risk of using other drugs by young people ages 12 through 17. And what you see here, the different colors, you see marijuana, other illicit drugs, and cigarettes. On the left side, well, your right side, I believe, on your right side, you will note that when the young people said, yes, I used alcohol, yes, I binge drinked, yes, I had heavy alcohol misuse, you can see the associated use of other substances, cigarettes and other illicit drugs, marijuana, right? Where they said, no, I was not using alcohol in the past 30 days, you can see the dramatic decrease in their use of other substances. And the same holds true when they talked about marijuana, where they said yes, you can see their associated risk of misusing other substances. Where they said no, the statistics of it is at a nominal fashion. And this impacted us in our nation so much that the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which has the authority of collecting all the data on behalf of the country, changed the way they look at data now. And now they are now reporting in the same manner. So here you see the red represents no past month alcohol use, the blue represents past month alcohol use but not heavy use, and the green represents past month heavy alcohol misuse. All this is sharing with you is that the greater the use or misuse of the substance, the greater the likelihood and participation it was, whether it was marijuana misuse, opioid misuse, cocaine misuse, or even as it relates to major depressive episodes and other serious mental incidents. And so these are just one of the ways in which we can share with you that the big issue that I want to provide you is that we are not in any singular substance crisis that we're addressing, but rather this is a polysubstance crisis that we are having to address and that we ought to prioritize. And so part of what it is that I want to share with you is that one of the resources that we have, Dr. DuPont and the Institute for Behavior and Health provides what I would suggest is kind of a standard that can be offered regardless of where you are and how you are and what you do. And that standard is referred to as one choice. And one choice is setting the clear goal of youth drug prevention as no use of any alcohol, nicotine, marijuana, or other drugs for reasons of health. And if we use that as a standard, it can be a guiding light for us as we begin to think about strategies that we might be able to employ. And so with respect to that, how many of you recognize that a guy in a suit and tie is probably not the best communicator when it comes to bringing that to our young people, right? How many of you are with me with understanding that the best communicators of this ought to be our young people, right? And so if we're going to do this, here's what I want to share with you. It is the youth voice that is important. And if we're going to do that, I would suggest to you that the most effective a group of young people that I've had the privilege of working with and seeing in action is right here at Project Vinda, and the So Why I Engage young people that I had the opportunity and privilege of speaking with and speaking to. I am telling you, they are incredible and can provide a bit of a model for other communities and other countries even to pay attention to. Extraordinary in what it is that they're able to do. Last points that I'm going to make. If we're going to do this, we have to do this equitably. And I'll share with you that part of what it is that we are looking at is many of us are familiar with this river story, the story of two people standing on the bank of a river and they're fishing and they see in the middle of the river a child that's drowning. And so one of them throws down their fishing pole and they jump into the water, they swim out, they bring that child, they bring him to the shore, and they call a very expensive ambulance to nurse that child to health. The next day they come back, and this time there are two drowning in the same place. They jump into the water, they swim out, they bring those two children to the shore. They call two very expensive ambulances to nurse those children back to health. The next day they come back, and then there are 12. The next day they come back, and then there are twice as many. And it's not until they decide that they're going to go upstream and find out why are they falling into the river in the first place and begin to work to make sure that they're preventing young people from falling into the river in the first place. This has been the message of prevention for as long as I've been a part of prevention. But how many of you will recognize that while we have been focused on that, there are still those that are downstream needing some help? And what we have to do and what we have to figure out is how are we able to ensure that if those folks are downstream consistently, why are they downstream, and how can we begin to provide them with additional help? This is all based on the fact that health is a social construction. Health is socially constructed. This is why the social determinants of health are so vitally important for us. And so I use this illustration simply to suggest that while we all might be in the same river, we're not all in the same boat. And what we need to do is we need to be able to understand and clarify how, as preventionists, we can become more thoughtful and directive in making sure that our young people understand their role in guiding us by ensuring that, and this is, my son helped me to think about this in this way. He radically changed the way I view equity. He shared with me that the way to engage young people around the idea of equity is by understanding that equity equals belonging to them. And if we're able to ensure that our young people are belonging, understand that they have a sense of dignity, making sure that we're paying attention to their sense of justice, then they can provide the guidance for us about how we might be able to bring science to our population in a way that can be effective. And so, don't worry about me skipping slides. Everyone in this room in one shape, form, or fashion can find themselves in this continuum of care. Our role and our job is to make sure that we are building bridges between that continuum in ways that matter for our children. And so I refer to this as getting into good trouble and a few ideas for us to be able to get into some good trouble. We can help prevent the use of any and all drug use with adolescents by promoting a one-choice campaign. We can make sure that we're helping our young people understand how to challenge the myths and educate their relationship and realities of commercialized polysubstance misuse. We can make sure that we're monitoring for inequities in exposure and opportunities and the disparities in their outcomes and applying pressures and questionable strategies so that we might be able to ensure that we are engaging equitably. Most importantly, we can take on the responsibility of making prevention obvious by becoming disruptive in what it is that we do. And so on behalf of my grandson and the twins, that's Valentina, that's Carmen, this is what they look like. Whether it's my children or whether it's yours, this is about making our world a better place because they matter. God bless you. Thank you very, very much for your time. If there are any, I don't mind. I want to get Margrét up here. Thank you very much.
I think we're always lost of words whenever we hear you speak, so that's probably why we don't have any questions ready right now. So thank you, Carlton, for your always inspiring presentation, and I feel the energy is always back in the room and showcasing why prevention is so important to us. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Margrét Lilja Guðmundsdóttir, and she is the Planet Youth Chief Knowledge Officer, and she will be speaking on the Icelandic Model. Margrét, you have the floor.
Hi. I'm kind of speechless. What an act to follow, Carlton. Thank you. I took off my high heels because my biggest worries were that I would fall off the extension. Not that I need one, but let's see. I'm going to stand still. If I'm trying to copycat Carlton, I would have to do some aerobics on the stage, and that's not my role. I'm more into soccer. Okay? The Icelandic prevention model. I'm standing here, not as the Icelandic model, as my friend loved to tell jokes about. It's not my lifelong dream. I'm standing here as a part of the Planet Youth team. I've been working with ISRA for more than 20 years, the Icelandic Center for Social Research and Analysis. I used to be the bad youth. I was a terrible teenager. I'm an extremely good mom. Everything exactly how it's supposed to be. And now I have 3 granddaughters. So I am Amma. And that's the Icelandic word, the most beautiful word next to mama, the mother. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about, in 20 minutes, what this Icelandic prevention model is all about. I learned so much today. Harvey told me that I'm too old to learn Spanish. Thank you, my dear colleague and friend. That's all I needed. But I've been sitting here really learning, engaging, and a little bit empowered by all the stuff I've been listening to. And I would really like to thank the organizer of this conference and the sponsors for their option, for ability to be here, you know. I traveled a long way, and I'm really happy that I did, so thank you so much. Iceland knows how to stop teen substance abuse, but the rest of the world isn't listening. It's probably when I put it on a white blank slide, it's really, really arrogant. True? And it's not like that we have done any magic in Iceland. Believe me, we are still having problems. We are still struggling. I'm still giving presentation, probably 4 or 5 every week to parents. It came from a news article written in 2017. Emma Young is her name. I've never met her. I have no idea how she came up with this brilliant news article title. But in many ways, it's true. And when I say I used to be the terrible teen, it's true. I started to smoke when I was 11. I started to drink when I was 13. And when I say this, I realize I'm watching the Zoom screen. Hi, you there on the internet, so I know it's not only staying in this room. But it was kind of the norm. It was kind of the norm being raised in Iceland, and I'm 51, so I'm not 87 or 90, you know. I was a teenager in the 80s, and I was behaving like the norm. But then we started to do something, and the world did notice that we were doing, and then we had Planet Youth. We call the research in Iceland, we call it Youth in Iceland. Then we had Youth in Europe, us at ISRA working or assisting people around Europe to actually just collect data and make reports. But we realized we had to do something, and Planet Youth was established in 2007, 2018. And we are trying to export the Icelandic prevention model. And when I say the Icelandic prevention model, there is no such thing that I can put on the table. It's more like us describing the way we have been working in Iceland for the past 30 days. So in my mind, it's more like a methodology. It's a way of acting, it's a way of working, it's a way of communicating, and actually so many things Carlton did put up on the slides here earlier. So Planet Youth approach. We have a global reach. We are working now in 17 countries. I'm always amazed when I look at the story for the past few years where we are working. And now George in South Africa is among our newest partners, like we call it, the Planet Youth family, growing family around the world. And we have this 5 guiding principle of Planet Youth Guidance Program, actually 10 steps, and all of them are written in peer-reviewed article, published, and that's also part of the Icelandic prevention model, the scientific base. We have more than 150 articles written in peer-reviewed articles. We call it the 10 steps, and I remember I was sitting with a colleague of mine in Mexico, in Guanajuato, and we were talking about the implementation and the 10 steps, and she said, "You only said 10 steps, and it sounds really easy, but of course it's more complicated." And we have the 5-year guidance program overview. And this is something you can find on our website and more related in all the articles I mentioned. An example of what the Planet Youth specialists do, we advise the coalition building and development of the Icelandic prevention or the Planet Youth model. We are focused on training, collaborative on substance use prevention approaches, training in data collection, and that's one of the biggest things, training in presenting and using the results on a local level. It's data analysis and reporting, training and designing and executing dissemination and action plans, advising, developing interaction and strategy, community development advice, project management support, and evaluation, like Matej has mentioned. So we are constantly referring to you, Matej. That's like you are the responsible for evaluation in the world. That's a good responsibility, but we both have internal and external evaluation of our work. So let me take you a little bit back in time. The fundamental question is what can be done, and we are actually still asking these kind of questions. Substance use was and is a large-scale problem, and we see from numbers all over that it's arising. The obvious answer is simply to eliminate substance in any form, and the second answer is tackle the issue from another angle, namely driving down demand, but that calls for more long-term thinking, but the results are also more rewarding. You've probably seen this picture. I know that many in this room have heard about the Icelandic prevention model, and this is probably the most fun picture, or the most common picture we show. Reykjavik used to be a really, really, really boring city. We were not allowed to have dogs, if you can see on the picture, and we were eating McDonald's back then. But we also had the town full of drunk young people during night. This picture is taken in the middle of the night, summertime, when it's bright, all the day long or for the 24 hours, and the town was full of drunk young people. We saw the substance use go up among 10th graders, and there was need for action. We had numerous prevention projects being carried out. Their focus was putting the responsibility of the substance use on the child itself, not the community that children live in. None of them used research as a base for their work. And unfortunately, we see that some projects today have still the same. This is an old picture, but this looks like the preventive work I was taught and I did have to watch when I was growing up. Visualize your grave. You can imagine how effective that was for the teenager. There was a sense of an urgency in '97. The government and Reykjavik municipality, where they were established a 5-year project with a control board, ECAD involvement and cooperation, custom and police, search for drugs in school, and parents and their initiative. And I think it's also really interesting when we realized that the government of Reykjavik was mainly run by ladies back then. The same ladies that fight for kindergarten and you know, the allowance for women to work outside their home. So it was a big feminist movement, you can say. But Youth in Iceland, the core element, it's evidence-based. To know where we are going, we have to know where we stand. And we have to build it on a basic, solid research. It's a community approach with a focus on changing the social circumstances of our young people and through that influencing their behavior. And research, policy, and practice to create and maintain a dialogue between research, policy, and practice. And I think that's probably the most beautiful thing about the Icelandic prevention model, how we are constantly having this dialogue. And my role for ISRA for past 20 years has been mainly to focus on, to give a presentation both for the parents, for the communities, for people who work with and for children. So we are using the data on a local level. I think it's also really good to have in mind, this is me and my classmates. The picture is black and white. It's not that I'm that old, but it's more fun like that. We were never asked about well-being, substance, family circumstances, leisure activities, or risk behavior. Words like bullying, sexual offenders, or being a victim of something. Mental illness, lack of mental well-being, words that we didn't even know how to use. And I think that's really important because we have a saying now in Iceland, like in many other countries, nothing about us without us. We are constantly having conversation with the children in Iceland and in so many other countries through our surveys. And they are answering and they are saying what they are feeling, what they are doing, and how their life is in general. So that's really, really important. It's all about understanding risk and protective. And we've talked a lot about that for the past, today and yesterday. The risk, the factors in life of young children and adolescents that increase the likelihood of substance use. Protective, the factors in life of children and adolescents that decrease the likelihood of substance use. ISRA, Youth in Iceland database, goes from 92 to 2022, and we start to survey children when they are 10 years old. And I have started recently to talk to parents of really young children, because I think our focus has been in Iceland, but in many other places, on parents that have already are going through the teenage years with the children. So it's really important to start to talk to parents when the children are just starting school or even before. We ask about all kinds of things, not only substance use, and that's why I can tell you the biggest challenges now in Iceland are lack of sleep, mental well-being, screen time use, energy drinks, nicotine bags, vaping or electronic cigarettes. So it's also a constant challenges that we are facing. And if we have a really good survey or questionnaire, we are able to answer all kinds of questions. The focus on the Icelandic prevention model is mainly on substance use, But due to the reason we have a really good questionnaire, we are allowed and we can look at other things. And that's really, really important. We see, for example, now after COVID, we have really good measurement on our children. After COVID, we see that there are lots of things that we have to focus on. And one of the biggest challenges is to get the parents back to school, because we meet up with parents in school area, and we have to get them there to talk to them, to introduce the results and tell them what we are facing. Our focus is primary prevention, as mentioned many times here before, trying to prevent before it starts. And here she is, or here it is, the famous Icelandic prevention model. It's a policy based on research findings. We found out that the family, the school, and the organized activities have a huge preventive factor in the lives of our children. And we know then the peer group's effect is something that can have a really negative effects. Also, hanging outside late during night, or hanging or doing nothing, that we see now regarding the social media, is a big obstacle and can be a huge risk factor. So we know that time spent with parents, support, monitor, and control, caring and warmth is something that has a big preventive factor in the life of children. We know that well-being in school is important, and to participate in organized activity. Example of action, we had the neighborhood level, the parental work. It was a big shout out actually to the parents to begin with in the start. And I so much agree what Edith said here this morning, that parenting is also something that we have to focus on. I sometimes tell the story that I have, like I said, 2 children, not complicated. We look at it as few children in Iceland, but I have this small city dog, you know, 2 children. I've never attended any parental course. I never took any seminar, or I never went to school. But when I got my dog as a puppy, this small city dog, 2 courses to make sure that I could manage to, my dog would behave, you know, like she was supposed to be. So I think that's something that we have to talk more about. It's not like there's a following manual when you have a child. So we have to focus on how we are educating and teaching the parents. We have the prepaid leisure time card, like Harvey mentioned this morning, that is highly used within all the municipalities, and then all kinds of media campaign aimed to discourage adolescents' alcohol use and cigarette smoking, and the focus was a lot on the adolescent itself. We have the annual prevention day, which I love really, I love much, because then or the children in Iceland in the 9th grade and the first year in high school, they are allowed to reflect on these results coming from our data. Okay, and I'm going to show you a little bit what the data from the Icelandic prevention model is telling us. Here she is. I call this figure trendy, Miss Trendy. We came from being among the highest in Europe, and we now have the lowest number of substance use. 42% in '98 had become drunk for the past 30 days. 23 were smoking daily, and 70% have tried cannabis. Now we see the numbers are really low, but when I show this picture in Iceland, I also tell it's really easy to get the numbers to go up again. And I'm a little bit, not only me, but people in Iceland are a little bit afraid of it, because while other people are looking to Iceland because we are doing something wrong, some people in Iceland tend to look into other countries. So if we would put alcohol in the grocery store, or we would legalize cannabis, we would see the numbers go up. Parents play a key role. We see the numbers go up while we look at the time spent with parents during weekdays. Also, my parents know where I am in the evening. That's another thing that's really important. We have the outside hour rule. Some people like to call it the curfew, but it's not the curfew, it's an outside hour rule that we, the parents, we use a lot. And it's really important, if not just to have the focus on sleep and lack of sleep. If you are supposed to wake up really early in the morning, you should go to bed. And you are not allowed to be outside after 10 p.m. in the winter time in Iceland if you're a teenager. We also know that organized activity are important, and it's not the facility that has the protective factor, it's the adult professional in charge, it's the coach, the music teacher, the art teacher, and so on and so forth. And what we do also is that we educate the trainers and the coaches in Iceland about their role within this organized activity. And then that's another thing that's really, really important. And the role of organized leisure time activities in Iceland have become a really important socialization agent. Municipality found participation fees for children and adolescents, we call it the leisure card, and there is room for everyone. And we also see then the trends in formal sport participation from 92 to 2022 has been growing. The focus is close community. How could an average figure on alcohol use in your country help the prevention workers in your community or municipality? The average doesn't tell the story. It's actually probably one of the worst number you can look at when you're looking at the data. Measure often, at least biannually, things change fast in the life of adolescents. You have to work with data as it was a fresh vegetable, make sure the information is out immediately after the data collection, and every school, every parent, and every prevention worker can have access to the current situation in the close community. So the Youth in Iceland core elements, evidence-based practice, using a community-based approach, and creating and maintaining a dialogue among research, policy, and practice, and we have a really good result. But there is no magic. Prevention needs to be a long-term, consistent, and comprehensive. Not one came, but more like a quiet revolution. It's about changing culture. We always say when we are implementing Planet Youth in other countries, we are not giving you or bringing you the Icelandic culture or the Icelandic economy, but it's about changing culture. It will take time. We have to look at it. We have to make sure that we realize we are not changing things overnight. And when we are giving you the story about the Icelandic prevention model, we are giving you a story about 20 years old story. It's not a project, it's about changing the way we think and then act in a different way. And it's about empowering those who care and make them the norm. I think that's probably one of my favorite statements, because I often get the questions, what about the parents who are not showing up? What about the parents who are really struggling and having a problem? What we see from our data, if you have a strong group of parents within your community or neighborhood or school area, they can work for the kids in general, also for the children who have parents that will never show up. I want to advise you to look at planetyouth.org resources. Our website, because we collected together both presentation from our latest conference that was held in September in Iceland. Really good presentations there and all kinds of material you can look further into. Thank you. 329. Have we place for questions? Bring me tough ones. Or not that tough, please, no.
Thank you. Probably this was the one. Of course, all the talks are good, but Icelandic model is quite probably one of the most famous models, as you said. The world has to look at you. The question is in relation to the outcome measures from a research. You've shown several graphs which even captured the leisure time spent by parents on weekdays. What are the outcome measures? Because on one particular slide you showed several outcomes like anxiety, depression, school time, other indicators. What exactly were the outcome measures and most, from the research point of view? The data that you collect and the data that you track.
What are the outcomes in general? What are the things we are showing to the parents?
Outcome measures as an outcome of your ongoing activity. As you said, it's not a project, but you have data, right? So what are the outcomes that you measure, the data that you collect?
We collect all kinds of, we look at preventive risk. I'm really sorry if that's not really clear. We look at the time spending together with parents. We look at the data regarding the leisure activity or the organized activity. We look at the indicators regarding substance use, and then we can show them. And it's really clear. It's the same picture we are drawing up now in 2022 as we were doing back in 98, 92. So the focus is mainly on risk and protective factors, but due to the reason we ask about all other kinds of questions, we could, for example, now we see there is lack of sleep. Our children are not sleeping enough, our grown-ups neither. We see the screen time use is really affecting their mental well-being, so that's another thing we report frequently to the parents and the people working in the municipality, and we constantly have focus on the substance use. And like I said, the mean can be a really bad measurement, and the mean for alcohol drinking, for example, in Iceland is around 5%. But I know when I look at the data, and that's what we are bringing out to the municipalities, that in some municipalities you can see way higher numbers. So that's what is really, really important, to have the focus on close community. Is this answering your question?
Thank you.
You're talking about legalization of recreational marijuana, and in a lot of countries there are talks about legalization of recreational marijuana. So how are you fighting against it in Iceland, and what kind of research data are you using to combat those?
I think that we, and when I say we, I'm not talking about us, only us at Planet Youth or ISRA. I think we in general could do much more in fighting that discussion, because we see from Icelandic data, from Icelandic hospital, that we have young people with serious mental illness due to cannabis use. And cannabis is really strong in Iceland. It's, you know, it's really, you can get addicted really soon and get really, really sick. That's what we are seeing. And I've been talking to people here while attending this conference, and I think that we should power up and be a much stronger voice in showing the data we have and all the research we have. I've not looked into the newest resource from US, Canada, where they have legalized cannabis, but I've heard and I've read at least articles about it that are showing not really good results. So we can do better, but we have doctors, young doctors, medical students that are really trying to keep the focus on that, because there is this debate, and we know it's all due to money, and that's probably our biggest enemy. The advertising that are aimed to children and adolescents. We see that in energy drinks, nicotine bags, vaping, and like we saw in the colorful rainbow-colored pills that we showed in the presentation earlier. So we know that we are tackling a big machine with lots of money.
Can I have just a quick query? In your model, Icelandic model, you talked about the parental engagement as well as community engagement. Now, wherever such effective policies are implemented in regard to demand reduction or harm reduction, parental engagement is a necessary component, as we get to see from many other presentations. So in this context, I'm a bit intrigued by the title of your presentation, the Icelandic model. The rest of the world is not listening to Icelandic model. So can you point out any specific area of disconnect between Icelandic model and that of the rest of the world?
The title was not mine, clearly, and I think it's really, really arrogant, but we like to put it up because sometimes I sense that people think that we've done some magic in Iceland, and I want to make it clear there is no magic about it. We are simply, actually, there was a professor I met in a conference in Vienna, he told Icelanders are just doing things that we know that works. And we are working in the local area, the community around the kids. Of course, we have problems like everywhere else. But sometimes you need clickbait to get the notice of people. And I think, and I know it's arrogant to say this, because I know, I have traveled the world and I know that people are doing amazing work wherever I go. But I think, you know, it's like when we start to row in the same direction and we know where we are going and we are using data. When you show a parent's figure about the mean in Iceland, it doesn't tell you anything. But when I tell you it's your child and his or her classmate that are showing this kind of number, it's a completely different way of looking at things. So that's another thing that's really, really important. Okay.
Excuse me. One more. Here.
Oh. Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing the stages and procedures of the success story in Iceland. I would like to ask, how do you incorporate, because the Iceland model of education is well appreciated and well known, so how do you incorporate the prevention strategies in the educational curriculum? Do you have any specific intervention as part of the educational curriculum? So can you give some more insight? How do you incorporate these procedures in the educational practices in the school?
We have contracts with municipalities in Iceland that covers around 90% of the inhabitants. So each and every municipality get the reports from the survey 6 to 8 weeks after we hand out the survey. So that's what I mean by fresh. Each and every preventive worker within the community gets a report, and every school gets a report. Regarding the substance or curriculum, regarding how they teach the children, that's not my role, actually. I've not that. We still have really good educational programs, and we still, in some school, are seeing the bad ones showing up sometimes. But I think they use the data to work on a local level, so the headmaster is introducing, or I come and introduce the results for the headmaster and the teacher, and then we try to have a parental meeting, especially aimed at the parents of the adolescents, and then we go from six-year-old, and we talk about the preventive and the risk factor. I think actually the best way of talking about the Icelandic prevention model is not to talk about substance use, because the Icelandic prevention model has nothing regarding the substance. It's all about how you can build a really good surrounding or society around your child, focused on, organized activities, spending time with your child, well-being in school. So that's the main focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Margrét, for showing us the Planet Youth model, but also showcasing that prevention, it takes time, and it is a quiet revolution, as you said. So even though we start today, we might not see results for a long time, but it's definitely worth it to start today. I would like to introduce you to the next speaker, Jason Q. He is the Senior Innovative Practice for Center for Justice Innovation. He was unfortunately not able to join us here in person, but he's definitely here live through Zoom. I hope you can hear us, and I would like to give you the floor. I would just mention that we will try to have a Q&A afterwards. We're just figuring it out technically. Those online can write it in the chat and are definitely encouraged to do so. So Jason, the floor is yours. Sorry, Jason, just a second.
With a big presence, and we help police forces and government departments to work through diversion schemes, out-of-court disposals. So we look to deflect people away from the criminal justice system and help navigate those really prickly, difficult subjects of policy and help police forces move forwards. Now, you may think that's a little strange for a former police officer. I was a detective chief inspector in Thames Valley Police. We have the cities of Oxford, you may have heard of, Windsor and Reading, Milton Keynes, so we're a large police force. And as a DCI, I investigated murder, drugs were a constant theme throughout all of my career. But before I share anything else, I just want to acknowledge a couple of other charities that I'm connected with And firstly, that's PTAC UK. We're a sister organisation of PTAC US, and that's an organisation of organisations that promote deflection and deflection away, pushing people away from the criminal justice system, letting the community deal with matters first and foremost. And alongside that, I'm a board member for ISUP UK, the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, and I'm really proud to represent all three organisations. So without further ado, I have about 15 minutes, and I'll leave about 4 or 5 minutes at the end for questions. So my career, I want to take you on a little story, and I'm going to share my PowerPoint with me. Here we go. Hopefully that you'll see that pop up in front of you, and let's go. So at 16, excuse the embarrassing photos there. I don't look like that anymore. But when I was 16, I joined the Royal Navy. I left school with no qualifications, and I had to make an important decision around when I was 15. I lived with my grandparents, and I had an idyllic life. So my grandparents were farmers. We grew fruit and vegetables, and it was that kind of very organic childhood. But I wasn't very clever at school. I got by. I didn't have any qualifications. So joining the Royal Navy was a natural step. And to join the Royal Navy, I had to take exams, and I kind of failed those. And I became a sonar operator. So there's a warship in the bottom right-hand corner, HMS Hermione, and I proudly visited India at Goa on that ship. It was a wonderful experience, the best city I've ever been to in my life. It was amazing. And as a sonar operator, you listen out for enemy submarines, and the Royal Navy train you. So, and this is my point. So, the training is so intense that you train, almost 24 hours of the day. You are the best at your job that you can possibly ever be. But life at sea was very diverse. When I joined the Royal Navy, I left a farming background and then joined a community. You can see there, 30 to 50 men in a very small environment from all walks of life. And in fact, at that time, there were people who were being diverted from prison. So people who had been convicted of crimes would go to court, and the court would suggest you can join the armed forces or you can go to prison. And obviously a lot of people joined the armed forces. So it was a big eye-opener for me. I'm quite small, I'm quite friendly, so I managed to get on with an awful lot of people, and I used to navigate the harsher side of life at sea. And then I went to the Gulf War and became a clearance diver. And this is where this is very relevant to the rest of my career and my transition in thinking. So I joined the Royal Navy, became a sonar operator, and then became a Royal Navy diver. Now, a Royal Navy diver is something quite special. It's a unique role. We dive in all conditions, at any time of day or night, freezing cold, Icelandic waters, for unexploded World War II ordnance mainly. And I'm not sure if you know, but there are still hundreds of thousands of tons from both World Wars surrounding the English Isles and throughout the Mediterranean and further afield. So there's lots of unexploded ordnance still lying on the bottom, and fishing boats trawl them up all of the time. And our job is to dive down and explode them, and just safely dispose of them. And during the Gulf War, during the straits in the Gulf, Saddam Hussein released hundreds of these mines, you can see, and our job was to swim. But clearly the point of this is not to make me look anything special at all, it's to actually show you the amount of training. We were an elite team. Our training was so intense that that's all we did. We were arguably the best in the world at our job. So I then joined the police, and this took me on a new journey. So I came out of the police, the Royal Navy, highly trained, but highly capable. I was a very young 23-year-old, but I was the second oldest in our intake, and I joined the Metropolitan Police in London, and I very quickly, after my basic training, understood that drugs were going to be a complete feature in every single thing I did. And every day I went to work, there would be something drug-related. So I was based in Kingston, and Kingston was home to the biggest drug treatment and rehab centre in the southeast of England. And Kingston is in the southwest corner of London. And I was a very capable, highly trained individual. I learnt the law and I applied it robustly, robotically. I would hit the streets at Kingston and I would be arresting 3 or 4 people every single day. I had a keen eye for people using drugs, and I thought, shamefully now, actually, on reflection, but I thought people use drugs for fun, for enjoyment, for, I thought that young woman sitting in a hedge, injecting heroin into her arm was all about fun. I thought, how dare you get high? I'm arresting you, instantly. And I became like this chap here, Robocop. Everybody must remember that film. You have 3 seconds to comply. And I was literally that robotic. I was, if I saw an offence in front of me, I'd be arresting someone. And I didn't consider the consequences of arresting people. I didn't consider at all the impact that I had as a police officer on someone's life. I thought I was doing the good. I thought that I was just applying the law, and I applied it vigorously. I really did. And then I took a bit of time to get to know and like. I became quite friendly, in fact, with some drug users around the Kaleidoscope. And there were hundreds of people that would come to the Kaleidoscope in the morning for their drug treatment. So I would see people in suits, teachers, lawyers, police officers, bus drivers, everybody from every walk of life used to come in for some form of drug treatment. And that puzzled me, because really I thought it was all about people who lived rough on the streets and slept, homeless or were sex working. I couldn't get my head around the kind of stigmatizing aspect of 2 different or 4 corners of society, all using the same drug. I got to know a chap called Lee, and Lee was a very funny young man. He used to make me laugh, even though I'd be arresting him at the time. He would make a joke of it, and we used to laugh together like anything. And I quite liked him. I felt quite bad for arresting him on occasions, but I looked forward to meeting him. And he was always in the same place, doing the same thing. And he lived with his partner, who was pregnant, and they lived rough on the street. And I came to work one day, and I heard that Lee had been murdered. And that really shocked me. And then when I understood more about the circumstances of his murder, I found that he was stabbed in the leg, which caught his femoral artery, and he bled to death. And he owed £120 for a drug debt. That was why he was murdered, for 120 quid. His life was worth a very small amount of money. And that really did impact me. I thought, what a waste of a life. He was the funniest man I've ever met. And then I thought, what about his partner? She's pregnant. That child is now going to be without a father for all of their life. And that really did impact me. And I had a moment where I began to consider, actually, these drug users, people who use drugs, are real human beings. So a friend of mine, Martin Blakeborough, who was the manager and CEO of the Kaleidoscope, took time to get me in and understand addiction. He invested heavily into what was addiction, what does it really mean, and he took a lot of time for me to understand. At first, I didn't want to go into the cafe at the Kaleidoscope and drink tea, because I thought it was dirty. I had a stigma about drugs and drug use. And then I began to realise and see different things. I began to see corruption. I began to see my colleagues, police officers, also using drugs after work, cannabis, for instance. But I didn't like it. I informed my supervisors about what was going on, which was difficult as well. And my colleagues were arrested, and I thought, I don't want to be part of this environment. So I moved to Thames Valley Police. And you can see some pictures there on your right. You may recognise a couple of them. Theresa May, the former Prime Minister, and I'll lead on to the story relating to her in a quick second. Lord Brian Paddick, he was a former police officer and championed a different approach to young people possessing drugs. And Diane Abbott in the bottom left-hand corner, she was an MP for the Labour Party, and again was really inspired about drug diversion. And everybody recognises probably the door on the bottom right, and that is linked to Theresa May, which I'll tell you about very shortly. But I had a great experience in Thames Valley. It was brilliant, policing big royal events, the Queen, and a funny story about the Queen. I remember her well because one day she ran over my foot, and it was the most painful experience. But the thing is, who do you tell? Who can you actually tell that the Queen ran over your foot? So anyway, she got away with that. And but drugs again were consistent. But I was fascinated with the drug using community. So I became an undercover police officer. I was trained to buy drugs on behalf of the police and live on the street. So I lived on cardboard. I lived within vulnerable communities to protect them. And I really enjoyed that part of the work. But I thought differently. The seed in my brain began to change from Robocop into a different person. Now, policing. What is the role of the police? Traditionally, I'm going to draw your attention to the bottom paragraph. Police are typically responsible for maintaining public order, safety, and enforcing the law and detecting crime. But what about vulnerability? The police, there are hundreds of thousands of police officers across the world. You could say we're the biggest outreach team in the world. Yet policing is not the same everywhere, is it? And we have a very important role if done correctly. The police can cause massive harm. We can cause huge harm to communities. Yet we can also cause significant harm reduction. We can really reduce vulnerability if we're careful, if we work with our communities. This is an infographic completed or produced by the National Police Chiefs Council in 2018-19. Forgive it, it's a few years old now, but it's still very relevant. I just want to draw your attention to what the drug issue is in the UK, but also the cost. So the monetary cost, treatment, enforcement, but look at that in itself. More is spent on enforcement than treatment. Shouldn't that be the other way around? I would argue it should be. Look at the amount of money on hospitalizations. Look at the amount of money attributed to drug-related crime. But where is the real cost? The real cost here is drug-related deaths. The real cost actually is convictions. If you look at the bottom of the infographic, convictions of young people aged between 10 and 17 for Class A drugs, that's heroin, crack, with intent to supply is increased by 69% in a 6-year period. That's huge. That's a huge number of young people in prison for supplying drugs, which is essentially a commodity controlled by adults. That just isn't right. So we need to do something about that. We need to reduce supply and reduce demand. But how do police do that? And there's one surefire way, and that's education and awareness instead of arrest. So what is diversion? Diversion is basically recognizing the evidence for many, particularly young people. The police actually doing nothing is far more effective than an arrest, than doing something which is harmful. Having the lightest touch from police has a far greater impact on a young person's life. And this evidence here from the Edinburgh study, quoted by Professor Alex Stevens. Interventions by the community drug and alcohol services, way before the police are involved, even if police find someone in possession of a controlled drug, can have a greater impact on that person's life. So what's happening in the UK? Well, actually, we've redesigned that infographic from the National Police Chiefs Council, and actually the true cost is record numbers of drug-related deaths. The UK has record numbers of drug-related deaths for the past 9 years. Stigma. We really stigmatize drug users. The police have this ability to penalize, to add a punitive element to drugs and drug policy and arrests. We can't actually arrest our way out of these drug-related deaths. The police can't arrest everybody in possession of a drug. And in fact, the huge numbers of people who do use drugs worldwide, the threat of arrest doesn't work anyway. So actually the law's ineffective, and we need to look at a different way. So in the UK, we are moving towards diversion, and diversion is based upon the lowest legal outcome available to us. So that means we can use the community resolution. A community resolution basically negates the need for an arrest. We don't have to interview, and we don't even require that person to admit their guilt. It's about actually a police officer finding someone in possession of a drug and then passing it over to the drug treatment or drug recovery or the young person's services as quickly as possible on the same day or the day after. That's really, really key. And this reduces disproportionality, racial disproportionality. It builds stronger public trust and confidence. The police in the UK is at a crisis point of trust, public trust. We are being scrutinised more and more and more, and we need to help the police navigate their way out of this situation. We need to rebuild trust. The police are the community, and the community are the police. The policing by consent will only work if you have the community involved. And one way to do that is through diversion. And also schools. So we have 20,000 young people excluded from school each and every year for possessing drugs in the UK alone. If you think about that worldwide, that's a huge number of young people being kicked out of school for possessing a drug. Actually, they don't need punishment. They need education and awareness. So policing in the UK now is moving towards actually giving these schemes, blending the model to this education sector so that the school can use diversion too. And you might think, there'll be someone somewhere thinking, well, this is too relaxed. This is too soft. This is too, it's voluntary. What if someone doesn't attend? Well, in these 4 police forces, they have academic evaluations that prove that young people, and in fact, up to 96% of young people complete a 6-week course. And over half of those people want to stay on beyond the number of sessions open to them. And it's not just drugs. It's about sexual health. It's about harm reduction. It's about helping a young person navigate their way out of the gang. It's about mental health. It's about all of those things that you heard actually in the previous presentation. It's about actually people coming together to really improve that young person's life. And what it looks like in practice here, there won't be any tests at the end of this. There's a lot of words here, but essentially a police officer finds someone in possession of a drug, and the police officer says, now, no, you don't have to say you're under arrest. You're coming back with me. What we do now, actually, I'll tell you a story. A young 14-year-old ran off from police officers. He was chased. He was caught, found with cannabis, and he was taken home. They were sat down on his parents' kitchen table, and the police officer said, "We're not going to take any formal action here," which surprised the parents. "We're not going to arrest your son. We're going to offer education and awareness. Will you take part in that scheme?" And yes, he did. The governance and everything else, the police are still aware of the situation, of course, but handing it over immediately to the drug service. The drug service then contact that individual on the same day or the day after, and then that's it. Hand over to the young person, drug service, who are the professionals. And then this young person was 3 weeks into the sessions, and then he admitted that he was using MDMA and LSD in a risky way. And obviously that was the highlight. He was using more harmful drugs with a bigger group of people. The drug service were able to say, "We're not part of the police. Bring your friends in. Bring your friends in, and they can receive education as well." And that's what it's about. I'm very near the end, and I want to move away from, in fact, want to go back to this slide here with Theresa May. When I was developing the concept of diversion, I spoke with Theresa May as it followed a drug-related death of a young woman. The young woman injected heroin and fentanyl and died from an overdose. And her parents asked the MP, which happened to be Theresa May, about the death, to inquire about the death. Theresa May is from the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party have a politically robust attitude towards drugs. The response to drugs has to be tough, has to be, robust. What I'm proposing was anything but that. It was trauma informed, it was educational, yet she had to acknowledge what I was saying was evidenced. She opened the door to number 10 for me to present my model. Despite the political red lines, despite the political difficulties of changing drug policy. Now, politicians talk tough, but actually, police, health, academia can really open the door. And you can see there, she didn't look too happy when I first told her about the scheme. But in the end, she was a huge advocate of harm reduction, but trauma evidence-based drug policy around diversion. And I have to thank her for that. So just to finish, enhanced harm reduction. This photograph here, this is only 2 minutes long, so I know I'm just going over slightly. This is Vespro. This is a drug consumption room in Copenhagen in Denmark. I took this photograph from the police HQ car park, Copenhagen Police HQ, and Vespro is the building in the foreground with the lights on. And that treats 8,000 people every single month, I believe, for injecting heroin. So I'll tell you what it does. So the young, he wasn't young actually, he was in his 40s. This man on the right, he was from Sweden. Now Sweden has a robust drug policy, and Denmark has a more health-based approach. So he saw the opportunity to seek drug treatment in Denmark and walked 60 miles to this centre. He appeared at the door. He had a wrap of heroin, and he was met by the nurse, and the nurse tested the heroin there and then to make sure it was not dangerous or contaminated. And the man then was given clean needles, harm reduction, and also the nurse was able to assess his body. Where, she said, "Where are you going to inject?" And he pointed to his groin, and she said, no, don't inject there. There's a big abscess, a wound. And she scanned for a safer vein for him to inject into. He was left alone for 20 minutes. And I'm just going to leave this here. Within 20 minutes, the whole system gathered around. The whole, every professional from every discipline was able to help that person. So a hairdresser, a chiropodist to look after his feet, clothing, food, shelter, wound care, and bloodborne virus screening. But more importantly, empathy, care and compassion and empathy, harm reduction. And I asked the police officers in the car park, what do you think of this? What do you think of 8,000 people injecting in this environment every single month? And they said, it's the best thing that's ever happened to the city. And I said, why? And they said, because there's no more dead people lying in the street. So when I go back to politics and tough, when we launched drug diversion in the UK, the papers, some newspapers were going, Thames Valley Police go soft on drugs. And I said, I was allowed to reply, and I said, there's nothing soft about preventing death. And that's absolutely true. So for me, thank you for listening. Sorry for running slightly over. I will just leave some contact details there on the screen. And please, I can answer any questions as needed. So I'll stop sharing there and take any questions if we're able to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. I'm not sure if you can hear the applause, but there was an applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story with the police and showcasing that, yes, the police can be very much be a strong outreach to people, and it can be used in two ways, and it should be more used into reduction of vulnerability, as you said. So thank you for that. I'm not sure how much time we have for a question. I don't know if there's a short question in the audience. It seems like otherwise we will write you the questions if there's any, as we are a little bit short in time. But thank you so much for joining us online, and a big applause to you from all the way from UK, India.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We will continue with the program. There is a slight change in the program. So as you can see, there was supposed to be a group discussion and tea break right now, but we will move that a little bit after the panel discussion. So we have first a panel discussion on the need for prevention protocol for drug supply and demand reduction, and after that we will have the group discussion where we will be drafting an action plan and have tea. So it's more of an interactive session. So we want to do that last. So you will have to wait for your tea a little bit longer. I hope that's fine. We will first I will give the word to Billy Batware, who is the program officer of the UNODC. He will be, oh no, sorry, that's wrong. Yep, that was the wrong page, my bad. We will go to the panel discussion, which will be led by Dr. Edezhath. My apologies for mispronouncing your last name. He is the advisory member of Project Venda, and he will be leading the panel discussion. And I would like to call on stage the panelists, Ms. Priyanka Gias, Mr. Richard Anthony, and Dr. Dharav Shah. Welcome on stage, and we will have the panel discussion.
Good evening. I think we've been sitting for a long time. Maybe you want to get up and, stretch a little and sit down. Maybe, that'll be a little nice. No? Otherwise, so maybe say hello to the person near to you. The Malayalam, the local way of saying hello, if it's a friendly hello, Sukhamalle. Sukhamalle means, aren't you well? Aren't you well? Aren't you all right? Sukhamalle. You can, if you want to say in the vernacular. Okay, we can slowly get settled. I have 3 eminent panelists with me. But before I call them, see, I am a teacher, a university teacher. I've been working for a long time with young people, a youth motivator, also active a little bit in the political field moderately with different political realities. Now, when I look around every day, when I read through as a lay person the newspapers, when I go to some sessions, sometimes I say, in today's newspaper, there were 6 drug abuse related items. 7 drug abuse related items today. Most locally in the state, sometimes India. So many tons of drugs caught, drug haul. almost every day, 3, 4, in great quantities, drugs are caught, seizure. Again, so many drug-related crimes, sometimes they say that such a big crime, sometimes very shocking things are happening. We've been hearing about these realities, but almost every day newspapers is carrying such reports. Then, so many carriers, even children, teenagers are arrested, caught here and there. So every day it's happening. And we are asking, what is our response? What is our response? A few things are happening. Anyway, Project Venda, I've been closely associated, my details were shown, closely associated with this project. Not that I am an expert in this field, nor am I very committed in the field, but as a person working with young people, I'm just watching with much respect, much appreciation, the creative and consistent thinking that has been behind it, the amount of research that goes into it, the networking efforts that has been happening, it's really awesome. One more important thing, these days, a couple, a young husband and wife, expatriate health workers working in a Western country, I know them very well. Almost every week they call me and they unburden their great pain. One thing, marijuana is legalized in that country. Then drug abuse is rampant, widespread. Families, they tell me, sometimes the stories that they narrate to me, extremely shocking. Sometimes they call me just to unburden, a counselor's burden, they want to unburden with someone. Say they talk to me, call me, and they wish for some kind of a realistic response, which they don't see in their local area. As I came in here, I've been posting some of the things that are happening here with them. Even as I was coming here for this forum, and in between I've been posting. So they've been saying, maybe you have to share with us how to go about. All of us are asking, what should be our response to these realities? That's why we are going into various themes, and today, now we are coming to this need for prevention protocol for drug supply and demand reduction. And we have three very efficient, eminent people from very different backgrounds. There is Ms. Priyanka Ji. She is an IAS officer, well experienced in the field. Then there is Richard Anthony. He is from the corporate sector. And there is Dr. Dharav Shah. He is a professional in addressing and contacting and dealing with these realities. So we'll start with Ms. Priyanka Ji IAS. So she has been the director of the Women and Child Department since 19th April 2002, did her bachelor's in engineering, worked in aerospace systems for more than 2 years before she quit her job and started preparing for civil service examinations. Her true calling, she was previously the District Development Commissioner of Wayanad, Kerala, and was at Calicut, then sub-collector and subdivisional manager between 2019 to 21. Then she was the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Social Justice and Empowerment in New Delhi. So she's really a very apt person to talk to us about this area. Welcome, dear Priyanka.
Thank you for your introduction. So today I've structured my thoughts into, two parts. One is I would want to share with you my experience when it comes to in the field of drug, like throughout my past career of 5 years, what are all the things that I have encountered and I have experienced in this particular field, and then come to today's topic. So my first exposure to this topic was back in 2019. I was posted as Assistant Secretary in Social Justice Department of Government of India. During my tenure of 3 months working there, our secretary put us into the job of studying this field and see what can be done in this particular field. As a part of this study, I could visit a rehabilitation center. Then I visited certain families. I also visited the famous New Delhi railway station where small children were found to be taking the inhalers. So all these things kind of moved me and made me think that what is the root cause of all this issue? Are we seeing drug addiction as an isolated problem, or are we asking them, in a private sector we do 5 why analysis, not just the surface level problem that yes, there is drug addiction, but why is it happening? And in each and every cases there may be different scenarios, and all these cases needs a different kind of analysis. At the end of the day, the way they are brought up, their social environment, the society, their financial status, all these things adds up to the condition wherein it results in the drug addiction or the drug related issues. For example, I can quote one example in which I met a family in which the father was an auto driver, the mother was a housewife, and the child they had a great dream, and they were sending into the child into a private school in Delhi. But an unfortunate incident happened in which they got to know that he is in a serious problem of drug addiction, and then he had to be removed out of school, put into the rehabilitation. Just imagine what it is causing to the entire family setup. It is not just the child or the suffering, but the entire family is suffering. But switch to 2022, my whole worldview has changed, because once you become a parent, the way you see things changes. Now I have a 1-year-old, and I exactly concur with this, every child matters. Only when you are a parent, you understand the meaning and the importance of, why you have to give every child the childhood they deserve, be it the happiness, the upbringing, the love and care, and a safe environment, so that they develop into a full potential human being, so that they develop whatever they aspire, whatever they want to be, they can be, only when we do all these things. In that way, this drug addiction is a major cause of concern for everybody, and for the society, for the government, for the private sector, for all the stakeholders who run this society. It's a very important component to them. Now, after coming to Women and Child Development Department, I got exposure to some of the other activities that the state government is doing, which I would want to put in few of them. So one of the important component that Kerala government is running is social services to the school children. We have 1,012 government and aided schools where we have school counselors, and these school counselors are responsible in identifying any issues with the children, especially any adolescent related issues as well as drug related issue. And we have been giving them training to identify and to address this issue among the children. Even in this project, we are very happy that Project Venda was associated with us in giving a refresher training to all these school counselors. And especially post-COVID, our school counselors have reported that there are different kind of behaviors that has been observed in the children, and they need capacity building to address this issue. Even they, at their level, the training and their capacity building is a kind of needs a refreshment, for all the school counselors. So we did this kind of training for the 6 high burden districts in Kerala. Now apart from that, we also have our responsibility to children. This scheme is run in around 361 schools in the Kerala. Here, every child, is assessed through I Know My Student card, and they're categorized into mild, moderate, and severe problems. And those who are in moderate category, mild category is, managed within the school itself. The moderate category, they are referred for a life skill program called Smart 40, in which all the life skills are, 10 different life skills are taught to them, so that their concentration or their interest is moved away from the negative things like addiction or drug into positive things, so that, they can, dream big and try to set a goal and try to achieve them. On the other hand, severe cases are referred to district resource center. So these district resource center has a panel of specialists, including clinical psychologists, and all other specialists who can, try, and engage children and try to help them. So this is another program. Now the third program that has been launched is the parenting clinics. In 21st century, parenting is a challenge. There is a saying called it requires a village to raise a child. But fast forward 21st century, we have nuclear families, we have working mothers, and parenting is a big challenge. So to help the parents, to understand what are the issues, at Panchayat level, we have outreach camps, which happens once in a month or once in 2-3 months. At block level, we have parenting clinics, which is organized on every Saturday, in which any parent who has any issues, and also the drug related issues, can be addressed, in a proper counseling services. And at district level, as I earlier mentioned, we have district resource center to any problem related to parenting, can be addressed. So these are the 3 major, schemes that are being run by the government of Kerala. Now on the other hand, the government of Kerala has taken the issue of drug very seriously. You might be aware, on October 1st, which was again postponed October 6th, a statewide month campaign was launched by our Honorable Chief Minister Shri Pinarayi Vijayan to combat drug menace in the state of Kerala. So all the departments, including Women and Child Department, were the participant in this. We have conducted several awareness campaigns, training programs for the capacity building of our functionaries, and also outreach programs and campaigns in all the schools as well as in the panchayats. So these activities have been going on from the past, in the entire, month of October, and also we have been committed to completely, to fight and eliminate this drug menace. So these are my experiences when it comes to the field of drug and drug addiction in India as well as in Kerala. Now coming to the need of protocol, we need to address, as I said, not just what is the immediate issue, but also go into the root cause of it. And once if you want to go into the root cause of it, there needs to be a proper analysis that what is, where is the demand coming from, why is the demand coming, and where is the supply coming. And here there are maybe local, national as well as international players also. So a proper protocol needs to be established to identify the demand. Yeah, the demand may be because of there is a peer pressure, maybe because of poverty, maybe because of some exigencies, and also the supply. So why is this supply? Why are we not able to tackle it for a long time? Who are the players in this? How are we going to deal with it? So there needs to be a proper, protocol or a system which manages not only at a local, national, but also at an international level. So with these words, I would like to, end my few words by saying that, it's not only the commitment of a government or an individual, but it's a commitment for the entire society that if we want our society to reach the full potential, it is the children who matters. There is a study which says that if they are identified at a younger age, then there is higher possibility of de-addiction and them coming back to the society normally. But after they cross certain age, it is the probability of them, going into de-addiction or, relapsing, or not going into relapsing is higher. So it is pertinent that not only, all the stakeholders, be a part of it, but also to identify at a younger age and try to address this issue. With these words, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Very clearly and concisely, she has been putting before us some of the measures that the government is taking, and she has been, heading some of the measures. I think we may have questions because she is the person of the state that we have access to and ask. But maybe the questions will have to wait because we'll finish the 3 presentations and then we will go into questions. The next presenter is Mr. Richard Anthony. He is Indian location leader, Ernst & Young Global Delivery Services. So Richard is in this role, he is responsible for driving the India operational strategy and operational transformation initiatives across EY GDS. And he's a firm believer in serving the community and is closely associated with the EY Corporate Responsibility Program. Much more than any other thing that he's doing in his organization, he's a close friend of Project Venda. Especially Project Venda, as you may know, we have a big presence, or we are having a big presence for many years in the central part of Kerala, but recently it spread to different other districts of Kerala. Now it has a very good presence in Trivandrum, the capital city of Kerala, where he is one of the very important supporters, helping, promoting all the activities and closely associating with Project Venda. With these words, I warmly welcome Richard Anthony to speak.
Thank you, and it's my pleasure to be here standing in front. I'm not an able person, as Sir put it. I'm just doing what's required as my personal social responsibility. Thankfully, I have a corporate behind me, right, who supports, sponsors, and also works on ground with the team. I represent EY and EY Global Delivery Services, which is the arm of EY which delivers services all across the world. We have a large presence in Trivandrum and in India. So I remember the first time as we came across our social responsibility or corporate responsibility discussions. I'm representing our corporate responsibility leader called Rumi Malik. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, and I'm standing in her stead speaking to you. So as this topic is, and you will understand when I say that this topic is a taboo in corporate world, right? People do not stand up and support it very easily because of the knowledge of this particular area. We mostly are happy sponsoring initiatives, activities, but when it comes to on-ground activities, I feel, we shy away from a lot of the main topics as we do. But regardless, there are so many areas that corporate responsibility is supported by various corporations today. Venda is one such project that was brought to us by Diana and Joseph. It took a long time for us also to get onboarded because we had our questions, we had our deliberations inside and saying, should we or should we not? But finally, I think what you call as the inner call, right? And we said, let's do it. And I feel proud that I stand before you, sponsoring Trivandrum as a district where this program is today being implemented. WENDA, as it says, no and no to drugs, substance abuse free environment, which is safe, which is what we are associated with. Fourth Wave Foundation has been a strong, implementer on ground, doing all the implementations. So our focus as a corporate has been on supporting the cause. So when we look at the problem is real. The problem is not something that we can, put across the table amongst the various topics on corporate responsibility that is there. But when we look at the media, we look at our growing children. I'm a father for 2 teenagers, and I definitely know the conversations that I have. And this, to be very honest, this program is something that I talk to them about. It has not only raised my awareness, it has raised their awareness too, right? So I'm like a sponsor or a christening to what their knowledge is in this area too. Because I know at some point of time in their life, they would come across a situation or situations, whether they themselves or their friends would encounter in this area. So when the topic of WENDA came, we did deliberate as a corporate, what can we do? Apart from the sponsorship, is there any areas that we can really support? Or we let WENDA do all the hard work on ground and we fill our corporate reports, right? But totally, as the leaders in the organization, we felt that preventive education is a big step in this area. And we realized through Fourth Wave Foundation educating us that it has to start very early, right? And hence, the topic when it came, we said, WENDA put up, Fourth Wave put up the topic of schools. And we said, yes, we would like to support. And school is definitely the starting point. Now, our focus, along with the WENDA, has been in the focus of awareness and education. So what can this topic lead to? What is abuse, right? And when you see abuse or when you read what's going out in the community, you need to know what it is to prevent it. And that is how we started with the avoidance education with WENDA. And we also realized that if avoidance education needs to be successful, we have to involve the ecosystem. So as responsible stakeholders in the program with Fourth Wave Foundation, we started engaging stakeholders on our corporate areas to educate them of this topic, and that is where the main sponsorship did come across. So when you look at the ecosystem around us and what a child interacts today, they interact with different personas, right, if I may say so. The family, the community, their schools that they are going to, the panchayats, all of them, the government, we just heard Madam Priyanka say, all of these are pertinent to working together in the ecosystem to make it successful. So integration with the government has been, in Kerala we have the support, and and I'm pleased to say that day to day, as we see, this conference itself is a great testament to the fact that this is a serious topic that needs to be addressing, and we have heard of various things that we are doing in this area. So as a corporate, and we talked to Fourth Wave, and they proposed that we would have 555 schools that we will target in the district of Trivandrum, spread over 5 years, and that's what the program is entailing. We are in year 2, a long way to go. So this involves
working with the stakeholders in the community. So internally, when we looked at it and we said to vendor, what can we do to help you? Apart from the sponsorship, what can we do? And then, in the corporate, we have this hours that you can contribute towards CR. So if we have 60,000 people working in India today, you have 60,000 multiplied by, say, we have targeted around 30 hours that everybody has to contribute in a year. And that's the number of hours that you have to utilize. So we started talking to Fourth Wave about developing content, developing training and awareness materials, helping them in monitoring and evaluation, and that has been an ongoing process that we are doing. Positive parenting program, as Madam said also, which is what Fourth Wave Foundation is doing, apart from the student education and support, the teachers and the staff, right, making them inclusive in the system itself. So we're good at services, right, as a professional services firm. So the contribution, I think, we put across on the table has helped Fourth Wave Foundation to accelerate. We are behind them in this area. Our objectives are very clear, right, which we are a strong supporter, where we can help them roll out high blended modules, content dissemination processes. We will advocate building the network, because it's not one corporate alone, right? Every other corporate that is in the state can start partnering with Fourth Wave Foundation in building this as a community or a corporate networks for support. Work across governments, work across stakeholders. We work through NGOs, right? So many of the NGOs that we work with on other programs can partner with us to support Fourth Wave. Collaborate is a very strong area of focus that we have, because our employees are our strength and employees have skills. So these skills, how do we bring these skills to these volunteering programs? How do we meet the demand of the on-ground stressed out teams, and what can we support? So corporate responsibility for EY has been a big area and will continue to be a big area. And we would support, advocate, and collaborate for the outcomes that we have targeted to. In a lighter note, we are corporate, so we expect outcomes and results. And I'm sure the team on ground sometimes feels pressured with the discussion that we have, saying, okay, month 5 has passed, what have you done? Where have we reached? And then Diana always comes to the table explaining, this is not like a normal program, right? This doesn't have, put something in and you get something out very fast, right? And it is a journey. So that's one of the things that we're learning on the way. And I'm standing here as an educated person myself in this area, and a strong supporter of it and a strong believer. So thank you for the pleasure of meeting you all as well as talking to you all. But again, I would say we have to spread the network. We have to make sure that we onboard more corporates as well as other entities into this program. And then together, I think we all can contribute into making sure that we address this most important area in the right manner. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thanks so much, Richard Anthony, for that very personal yet very friendly and clear presentation on what he's involved and how he's helping. Maybe a good model of collaborating with corporates in this effort. Now we have another very important person, Dr. Dharav Shah. So he's a psychiatrist trained at NIMHANS. He has been working on empowering youngsters with adequate knowledge about alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis for the past 15 years. He has given more than 470 presentations on this issue in front of varied audiences, including 54 medical, dental colleges, and 7 B.Ed colleges. And he has collaborated with the WHO programs, especially in his initiative called Meri Pyari Zindagi. Welcome, Dr. Dharav.
Hi. So I don't look like a doctor, but believe me, I'm a doctor. And I really want to thank the organizers of this conference to give me an opportunity to talk to such an active and motivated group. So, as all of us, I also believe that solving this thing requires a very comprehensive approach, and multiple people from multiple different areas have to come in. So what I do is harm demand reduction. So I'm just going to focus on 3 points in that, what I believe, and I believe are slightly different from what a lot of people think. Probably not here, but in the larger community, people don't think this, and I'm trying to convince them of that. One, why do we need to start? Why we need to address the problem where it starts? Gateway drugs. Second, how do we improve the risk perception? And third, what are some of the strategies which I feel would be very good? First, gateway drugs. Why do we need to focus on it? Because you won't find probably even 5% people who are on narcotic drugs today, but had not taken alcohol or tobacco before they ever took this thing. It starts there. And when a person starts drinking alcohol and feels, wow, it's a great high, it's only natural that in a party when the friend says, you want to experience a better high, why not? So that introduces them to this concept that the way to enjoy life is to get high. That's the root cause, and I think if we attack there, if we make sure that the youngsters don't drink alcohol or tobacco, we can be reasonably sure they're never gonna experiment with any of the other substances also. But most importantly, are these gateway drugs relatively less harmful for our society? So if you see that according to Global Burden of Disease Study 2019, out of the 5 most common risk factors for disease-adjusted life years lost in the young active age group of 25 to 50, alcohol is the most common risk factor, tobacco is the 4th most common risk factor, right? If you look at the data in India, the number of people addicted to alcohol is 10 times the number of people addicted to cannabis or brown sugar. Now why? Just because we have given social acceptance to these substances, they are perceived as safe, a lot of people take them, and therefore a lot of people get harmed. And therefore I agree with what Mr. Carlton had to say. We have to take a disruptive approach and encourage society to change its perspective towards the permissive attitude which we have given to it. We need to change that. So I was very glad to know that in USA the alcohol use is decreasing, but sadly in countries of Asia it is exponentially increasing. In the last 10 years itself, the number of current drinkers in Indian men has doubled and in Indian women has quadrupled. Simply because it's a substance which well-educated doctors, engineers, lawyers believe it's okay to take, not very harmful. The risk perception is extremely low. Poor people, they drink more. Well-educated people like me drink in control, I can't get harmed. This seems to be the belief everyone has, right? And we need to attack that. And that brings me to the second point, risk perception. Does that matter? So as we have seen in the Monitoring the Future project, in USA, these graphs specifically show regarding cannabis. So the first graph is showing what was the attitude towards, the first graph is showing what was the, when 12th standard students were asked how risky it is to take cannabis. So the first graph shows, do they think it is risky or not? The second graph shows what was the consumption of cannabis. What was seen is, in around 1975, the community, the media were making it a point to tell young people cannabis is bad. So till 1977, the cannabis use was, till 1977, the cannabis use was going up. Then in 78, because the media and community was making it a point to tell it is bad, the risk perception started to build. Exactly 1 year after that, the cannabis consumption started to decrease. Then around 1992, the risk perception of cannabis started to decrease. Youngsters started believing it's okay to take cannabis. Because the cannabis use had dropped, the community had stopped to talk on it. Now, as the risk perception started decreasing, the immediately next year, the prevalence of cannabis consumption started to increase. And this correlation between risk perception and use was seen for other substances also. Is it important that we do life skills, that we give healthy recreational opportunities? Absolutely yes, and probably they are more important. But in a society wherein your most emotionally competent youngsters who end up in medical colleges, law colleges, engineering colleges, if they feel it is safe to take these substances, if you are in a society where a youngster goes to play football and the friends over there on the football team guide him how to take cannabis, if you are in that society, then you have to work on risk perception also. So while whatever area you work on, I would just encourage, especially for alcohol, because when 12th graders were asked how risky it is to experiment with heroin, 60% said it is risky. Alcohol, 9.4% said it is risky. So I think risk perception is an important thing to act on. How do I'll just share some of the things I share to convince young people why it is a risky thing to do. Wherever I go, including medical colleges, when I ask an open-ended question, how does alcohol kill? Liver cirrhosis and accidents are the only two things which come up confidently. Everyone knows the misconception, alcohol in moderation is good for the heart. But heart attacks and strokes are one of the most common ways in which alcohol kills. Almost no one is aware of it. Cancers. According to WHO, 18% murders and 18% suicides in our society are attributable to alcohol. Do people have a clue of how strongly the connection is? And I believe there is such a strong data. So, okay, point one, what are the various other ways in which alcohol kills? I make it a point to tell youngsters that. Second, the industry tries to make young people believe that so far as you drink responsibly, it is safe to drink. And I try to correct this misconception. I try to tell young people addictiveness, tolerance, withdrawal, craving, these are physiological properties of addictive substances. Yes, they would not happen to everyone, but they do happen to around 15% who touch alcohol. Once people get addicted, we tell the society and their family, don't blame him, he's not responsible, it's a disease, it can happen to anyone. Why don't we tell youngsters it's a disease which can happen to anyone, don't start, right? So I believe that's one of the most important things which we need to explain in detail to people. The other misconceptions which I say is, okay, even while you are still alive, it impairs the quality of your life in multiple ways. Alcohol in moderation, beer is not alcohol. Symbol of equality and female emancipation. So I explain them how the industry is focusing on women because they want to double their marketplace. So I address all these misconceptions. Have I been effective? I don't have any long-term data, but I like to believe that yes. So for example, regarding heart, before my talk, so this is a data of medical students from 4-5 medical colleges. Before the talk, around 34% says yes, it's advisable to drink alcohol to protect your heart. Afterwards, it was only 9%. Out of those who were not taking alcohol currently, I asked them, okay, someday would you like to take it? So around 40% said yes. After the presentation, only around 6% said yes. So I would like to believe youngsters are not fools to hit the X on their own leg. We are failing in our responsibility to convince them that it's an X, right? And when we explain them well, I don't believe youngsters don't want to hear. Usual feedback I get is, thank you, sir, we didn't know all this. Go to all schools and colleges, tell them. That's the usual feedback I get. So, will you ever hear, okay, youngsters like to take risk in life. Don't tell them wear a condom before sex, otherwise you will get HIV, because if you tell them they like to take risk, they won't wear a condom. It sounds crazy, no one would even tell like that. But regarding alcohol, tobacco, somehow we believe that if we caution them, don't do it, they will do it more. There is absolutely no reason. It is glamorization which creates curiosity. Education doesn't create curiosity, the right education kills curiosity. So, the talk which I give in schools and colleges, it is there on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is called Powerful Gyan, so you can check it out. Also, what we try to do is the scientific data which is published and lying in medical journals. So we try to convert it in simple posters which can be shared on social media, so you can check them out. Regarding cannabis, I just wanted to quote 2 studies to just tell how strong data is there. A 15-year-long study in Finland has proven that adolescents who were taking cannabis 5 or more times by the age of 15, the risk of getting psychosis in the next 15 years was 6.5 times more. The Swedish conscript study has shown that 13% cases of schizophrenia could have been averted if cannabis use was not being there. Point I'm making is there is a lot of strong scientific evidence which we can use to convince the youngsters now. We can use that. So, what are some of the strategies I believe would work? Empowering youngsters with the right knowledge and skills. And like we are saying, we need to reach the most vulnerable people. How do we reach them? How do we reach people in the most rural villages of the country? I believe the only 2 ways is empowering the teachers in the government system to do it, and still better have it in the school curriculum. Only then can we reach the marginalized section is my view. And currently I believe this more than which chemicals combine to form what or trigonometry, substances which are known to ruin so many lives. At least 1 dedicated chapter in each standard. That's the bare minimum which should be there. We could use the power of social media. So we complain that the alcohol industry is using social media to spread false expectations. But we can also use the same power of social media to make it uncool to drink. So WHO last year did an online campaign which has 15 audio stories, 10 videos and 20 memes, so that various aspects connected to alcohol can be discussed in an interesting, engaging manner with them. It is in Hindi, so those who are from Hindi-speaking states can make use of them. What we are currently trying to do is, we are connecting to school principals and telling them, okay, if each week you just send 1 audio story, 1 video with your students, then it wouldn't take any much effort on your time. And without much effort, a consistent campaign can be done. So these are some of the memes from the campaign. My concluding argument, that in a society where some of the most famous celebrities are telling youngsters, drink, that's the way to enjoy and become successful in life. And almost no one confidently telling them, don't drink. I had gone to a marriage where we were welcomed saying, the bar is that side, then don't tell us we are orthodox. So if no one in the society feels, I mean, of course we don't have to force them, but it's not our right, it's our responsibility to recommend. If we believe it's an addictive poison which ruins lakhs and crores of lives, it's our responsibility to at least advise. And I believe we can definitely work against surrogate ads. The Pierce Brosnan, Akshay Kumar, Amitabh Bachchan, they have actually gone, I mean, they have actually said, okay, we understand it's a wrong thing we have done, we will not do it henceforth. It does work. We need to encourage people we work with to write to them to stop these ads. Also, I'll conclude by saying we need to take a stand on the issue. As I said, when I was in 5th standard, my father used to drink in parties. One day I went to him and said, if you are drinking and you are telling me it's bad, how come it's bad? The poor fellow thought for five days, then came and told me, it's bad for you, it's bad for me, I'm stopping from today. He didn't give me data, but he recommended me strongly it's a bad thing to do. Unfortunately, we believe we will be orthodox if we recommend. Just as we recommend people to do exercise, to eat healthy, we need to recommend youngsters don't touch addictive substances, and we need to denormalize it from our family gatherings and official functions, because otherwise the message we are giving young people is, you are a child, you shouldn't do it. It's a thing to be done after 18 on getting adult, and it becomes a symbol of growing up. So I think we need to change there. Regarding supply reduction, one point I'll say and I'll stop. Addict Sri Lanka did something very wonderful which I want to tell. It put up on its site what are the evidence-based preventive strategies. Then it asked politicians to come and sign on their site which politicians agree to implement them. And then they told people vote for those who have done that, you know. And though there is a lot of evidence now that restrictions work, but people don't know it. A lot of educated people believe that health education is the only way to solve things. It's a very important way. Brother up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dharav. I think we have overshot our time, and like other sessions, the interactions and question answers we'll have to do privately during the break times. And you're also waiting for your tea, I understand. Thank you very much. We had a good time. Thank you.
Before everyone gets up, I want to give, sorry. So just to share a little bit of what will be going on, I will be giving the word to Billy to explain to us the purpose of the next session. So it's not going to just be a break. It's going to be a discussion. So it's going to be very engaging and interactive. So I would like to welcome Billy Batware, a program officer of the UNODC, on stage to lead us through this session.
Okay, perfect. Do you have... Good afternoon, everyone. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Like this, like somewhere in the middle? Right? Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Everyone hands. Yeah? Okay, perfect. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's really great. I would like you to... Just a little game. If you could stand up, because I know, I think you're saying it's great, but let's see if it can be even greater. Think for a few seconds about your own inner power. You know, every one of us has an inner power within ourselves, or maybe you aspire to some kind of a superpower. If you don't have your own superpower, you probably aspire to someone else's superpower. Think about that for a few minutes. And reach out to that maybe for about 10 seconds, you know? That will help us to go through the next about 45, 30 minutes that we have together, including the coffee break, right? Are you thinking about that? Yeah, take the 10 seconds. Espion, you as well. Everyone. Yeah, that's great. That's really great. It feels better, doesn't it? It feels better. Okay, great. Please have a seat. Thanks so much. So I think after so much that we have consumed in the last, this is the end of the second day. There's so much that has been shared, so much information, so much wealth, and so much knowledge, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of hope and inspiration. And so we would like to be able in the last part of this day to capture those ideas into some sort of an action plan, right? How do we take that forward from this forum? right? I think that's very important. A lot of people have been talking about, we need solutions. We need to do more to ensure that our children are safe for the future. So we'd like to capture those ideas and knowledge, the wealth of knowledge that we have had for this, from this forum into an action plan. And so I just want to share with you some of the ideas that you already know that we need to include in that action plan. Actually, I would need a mic, if you don't mind, if you have a mic for me. Can you give me a mic, please? Yeah. Yeah. Not that you don't know what an action plan is, but just to remind ourselves so that we can go in a group work kind of knowing exactly what we can expect here. So, and I wanted to start with this quote from the USA. And Benjamin Franklin back then said that by failing to prepare, you are preparing, no, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail, okay? It's a bit of a confusing quote here. But I try to, because I'm also a trainer and a coach, I try to formulate this into a more positive, in a positive way. And I think what we would like to be able to do in the next session is to actually succeeding in preparing. So therefore, preparing to succeed in what we are doing all together, right? So that's just a way to kind of paraphrase what Benjamin Franklin said at that point. If this works, I need to move to the next slide, actually. Okay. So what is an action plan? We all know what it is, but basically it's a document that lays out what you need to do moving forward, usually, right? Usually includes a timeline, includes specific actions, includes obviously goals and objectives that you would like to achieve. And it helps you to break up the process into activities that you would like to take in order to reach your objectives. And it also helps you to motivate your team or yourself to actually carry through those activities. Most importantly, though, it allows you to ensure that there's accountability to carry through those activities with yourself, with your team members, and others that are involved in that process. So, for today, in the interest of the forum itself, our objective, actually, is to, as a collective, we're looking at ourselves as a collective community from this particular forum, is to look forward from this forum, from what we have learned and what we have shared and what we are aspiring to do, and see what we can do in the next 3 years, right? So the timeline is from now 2 to 3 years what we can do to make sure that our children are safe, that our children matter, and they live a childhood free from drugs, right? As a community, this is what we would like to try to do. Is that clear for everyone? Okay? So, let me share some of the elements that I believe should be included in this action plan. First of all, you have to set yourselves goals, right? This is an important one. Set yourself goals. Have a list of actions that you would like to take in order to achieve those goals. Give yourself a timeline as to when you are going to achieve those goals or to implement those activities. Very important, when you are thinking about the activities and the goals, think about what you can and cannot do, right? So what are the resources that you have in place or the resources that you might need in order to implement those activities? Very, very important. And then make sure that you have a plan in place to track and monitor your activities moving forward for the next 2 to 3 years. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes explaining a little bit about the goals themselves, because I think that's a starting point and that's very important to make sure that you get it right. So we usually look at the goals that are SMART. I think you are all smart in this room and in what you do, but there's another SMART when we talk about setting the goals. And I would advise you that when you set your goals, you be basically as realistic as you can. So don't set yourselves too many goals. Otherwise, you might not be able to achieve them, right? So I would suggest each team set yourself 2 to 3 goals maximum. Those you can achieve, I think, for the next 2 to 3 years. So the goals have to be as specific as possible. So don't be vague. Don't be vague, you know? Don't say, I'm going to save the world. That it's great, sounds great, but I'm not sure if you can do that, really, right? So be as specific as possible. Also, make sure that the goals that you set yourselves can be measured, right? It is very important to be able to look back and say, what kind of indicators am I going to use in order to achieve my goals? That's very, very important. So make sure that you will be able to measure your goals and that you will be able to attain those goals, right? They're attainable. Again, I think one of the things that we've been talking about, especially when you're dealing with youth and people who, victims, for instance, you don't want to set too many expectations. You don't want to raise too many expectations. So you have to make sure that they will be attainable. They have to be relevant to what you do and to the problems that we're discussing today as well in this forum, right? And finally, they have to be time bound. So as I mentioned, 2 to 3 years is the whole work plan. However, the activities could be obviously like 6 months, maybe 2 months, maybe 1 year, but they have to be time bound. So don't give yourself the whole time in a word, right? Make sure that we are operating within the 2 to 3 years. So I've already explained this. So how is this going to work? So we're going to have 4 moderated groups within the room, right? So we have 4 facilitators who are going to help us to go through that. And we will have about 20 to 30 minutes, so about 30 minutes perhaps maximum, right, for this exercise. And after that, we would ask members of those groups to come on a stage and present just in a few words, maybe in 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes, about the outcomes of the discussion. So what are the goals, what is the action plan, what are the content, what is the content of the action plan that they have come up with? And just keep in mind that this is just a start, right? So don't think, okay, I have to figure everything out from this room. It's just not possible. It's not realistic, right? It's just a start. We'll be able to continue the discussion later on, and we will finalize a work plan also based on other feedback that we will get from you later on. As I mentioned, maybe in about 2 to 3 months, I'm not sure, Diana will be able to tell us later on when we can finalize that. But just to make sure that don't think that we will have to finalize everything here. We will continue this discussion afterwards. So with that, I hope you can, you will keep this in mind, this slide here. And as you go to the break to get your coffee and tea and then come back, keep this in mind, and then you will go into groups and you discuss for about 30 minutes maximum, and then we will report from that, and then we will capture all that information in a draft work plan, which we will send to you later on, and we will continue to work on it during a given time that Diana will advise us in that regard. Yeah? Cressida says, okay, so now people can go for a break, and you come back in the room. Sorry? Okay, so the tables are assigned. You want to say, yeah? Okay, TV is going to give you more instructions about the tables. Okay, perfect, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Billy, for briefing us through. So what we'll do now is, one, we have teas and coffees arranged inside the hall. So if you can just turn towards the back of the hall, teas and coffee is arranged. So you can quickly collect your teas and coffee, and there are 4 tables will be available for you. As you get up, the hotel will just make arrangements for the table. So people from the African continent, people who have come from the African continent, your table will be right here in the front. And people from the Asian continent, your table will be at the back of the hall towards my right. And and from Asia, the Indians will be in a separate group. So the people from India will be in the back on the hall towards my left. And people from North America, South America, and Europe will be in the front of the hall towards my left. So if you can quickly grab your teas or coffee and come with, and you could just move your chairs and make circles around your tables. There will be moderators on each of these tables who will then further guide us with the instructions. So we'll have 5 minutes for everyone to quickly gather your tea and coffee and come back to the tables. Thank you.